They called him the Smoke King, the man who turned a silver mine into an empire and miners into slaves. When I arrived in Brimstone Canyon, I had 48 hours before he'd hang an innocent man for stealing bread. I wasn't a lawman. I wasn't a gunslinger. But I was the only one who knew the truth. The real thief sat in the mansion on the hill, counting blood money while children starved in the streets below. These lands know pain better than joy. Every mark in the sand tells a story, but folks rarely listen. I saw this tale with my own eyes, like the crackle of a fire at night. The shadows of the past don't leave. You'd best listen close. Out here, it's the only way to survive. The town of Brimstone Canyon clung to the mountainside like a parasite feeding on stone. You could see it from miles away. A jagged wound carved into red rock, smoke rising from the refinery stacks like the breath of some underground beast. The road leading in was narrow and treacherous, winding through ravines where the bones of failed prospectors lay bleaching in the sun. Most men who came here came for silver. Most never left. I rode in at dawn, when the light was still gray and uncertain, casting everything in shades of doubt. My horse, a dun mare with more sense than most humans I'd met, picked her way carefully over the loose shale. The sound of her hooves echoed off the canyon walls, announcing my arrival to anyone paying attention. In a town like this, everyone was always paying attention. The first thing that struck me wasn't the poverty, though God knows there was plenty of it. Wasn't even the stench, a mixture of sulfur from mines, human waste, and the sweet rot of bodies they didn't always bother to bury properly. No, what hit me first was the silence. For a mining town, Brimstone was quiet as a grave. The refinery hammers should have been pounding. Men should have been shouting, cursing, singing those crude songs miners sing to keep rhythm with their work. Instead, there was only the whisper of wind through the canyon and the distant caw of ravens circling overhead. The main street was wide enough for 2 wagons to pass, lined with buildings that had seen better days, if they'd ever seen good days at all. The saloon leaned to one side like a drunk trying to remember which way was up. The general store's windows were so caked with dust you couldn't see inside. Even the church, a small wooden structure with a cross that had half fallen off, looked abandoned. But people were there. I could feel their eyes on me from behind cracked shutters and half-opened doors. Watching, waiting, afraid. I tied my horse outside what passed for a hotel. A 2-story structure with peeling paint and a sign that read rooms, in letters that had once been gold, but were now the color of old brass. A woman stood in the doorway, arms crossed over a thin chest, her face carved from years of disappointment and hard living. "We're full," she said before I could speak. Her voice was flat, rehearsed, the kind of lie she'd told so many times it had stopped feeling like a lie. I looked past her into the empty lobby. Through a doorway, I could see a dining room with 6 tables, all of them unoccupied. "That's so." Her jaw tightened. "That's so." I pulled a silver dollar from my pocket, real silver, not the company scrip that passed for currency in most mining towns. I held it where she could see it, let it catch what little light there was. "Reckon you might find a room for a man willing to pay in real money." Greed and fear warred across her face. Greed won, but only barely. She snatched the dollar so fast I barely saw her hand move, then stepped aside just enough to let me through. "Room 4. Upstairs. Don't make trouble." "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am." The room was what I'd expected. A bed that sagged in the middle, a wash basin with a chip in it, a window that looked out over the main street. I set my saddlebags down and went to the window, standing to one side so I wouldn't silhouette myself against the glass. Old habits. From here, I could see more of the town. The refinery dominated the eastern end, a massive structure of wood and iron belching smoke into the morning air. Beyond it, carved into the mountain itself, were the mine entrances, dark mouths that swallowed men at dawn and spit out fewer at dusk. And above everything, perched on a plateau carved from a canyon wall, sat the mansion. They called it the King's Palace, though no king had ever lived there. Just Cornelius Blackwood, the man they called the Smoke King. From my vantage point, I could see the mansion clearly. 3 stories of imported lumber and glass windows, painted white to stand out against the red rock. Gardens surrounded it, green and lush in this desert hell. The sight of those gardens, watered while children in the town below went thirsty, told you everything you needed to know about Cornelius Blackwood. A commotion in the street below drew my attention. A group of men were gathering near what looked like a hastily constructed platform. My gut tightened. I knew what that platform was. A gallows. They were building a gallows. I watched as more men joined the group. They worked quickly, efficiently, like they'd done this before. By noon, the gallows stood complete, its shadow stretching across the dusty street like an accusation. A noose swung gently in the wind, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. 48 hours. That's what my contact had told me. 48 hours before they hanged Thomas Chen for stealing a loaf of bread from the company store. 48 hours to prove that the real thief was Cornelius Blackwood himself, who'd been systematically stealing from his own workers for years, cooking the books, paying in scrip that was worthless anywhere but in his own stores, creating a system of debt that amounted to slavery in everything but name. I turned from the window and checked my revolver. 6 shots. I hoped that would be enough. The saloon was called the Silver Vein, and it was the only place in town that showed any sign of life. I pushed through the doors just after noon, letting my eyes adjust to the dim interior. The place smelled of stale beer, tobacco, and desperation. A dozen men sat at various tables, nursing drinks that probably cost more than they earned in a day. Behind the bar, a man with a scar running from his eye to his jaw watched me with the expression of someone who'd seen too much and cared too little. I walked to the bar, my boots loud on the wooden floor. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to me. Strangers were rare in Brimstone Canyon, and rare things were either valuable or dangerous. Nobody'd figured out which I was yet. "Whiskey," I said. The bartender poured without comment, sliding the glass across the bar. I laid down a silver coin. He looked at it like it might bite him, then swept it away quickly. I sipped the whiskey. It was rot gut, barely better than the kerosene they probably used in the lamps, but it was wet and it burned, which was all that mattered. I let the silence stretch out, let them wonder about me. Finally, a voice from behind me. "You're not from around here." I turned slowly. The man who'd spoken sat at a table with 3 others. He was big, with hands like slabs of beef, and a face that had stopped more than a few punches. A foreman, probably. One of Blackwood's men. "That's perceptive of you," I said. His face darkened. "We don't like strangers. Bad for business." "I'm not here for business. Just passing through." Then passed through faster. He stood, and his companion stood with him. 4 against 1. The odds could have been worse. I set my glass down carefully. "I'll leave when I'm ready to leave." The big man's hand dropped to his gun. Behind the bar, the bartender ducked down. The other patrons scattered to the edges of the room. Nobody wanted to catch a stray bullet. "Last chance, stranger. Walk out that door, or we carry you out." I smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. "I don't carry easy." He drew. He was slow, telegraphing his moves so obviously that my grandmother could have beaten him. My hand moved, and suddenly my revolver was pointing at his chest. I hadn't even realized I'd drawn until I felt the weight of it in my hand. "Sit down," I said quietly. He froze, looking at the barrel of my gun like it was a snake about to strike. Slowly, very slowly, he sat. His companions followed. I holstered my weapon and picked up my whiskey. "Now then, let's try this again. I'm looking for information about Thomas Chen, the man they're planning to hang day after tomorrow." The bartender's head popped up from behind the bar. "Mister, you don't want to get involved in that. That's company business. The company doesn't own everything. In Brimstone Canyon, it does." I finished my whiskey and set the glass down. Then I guess it's time someone reminded them otherwise. Thomas Chen lived in what they generously called the workers' quarter, a collection of shacks clinging to the canyon wall like barnacles on a rotting hull. I found his dwelling just as the sun began its descent, painting the rocks in shades of rust and blood. The door hung crooked on its hinges. There was no lock. In Brimstone Canyon, Locks were for those who had something worth stealing. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of sickness and despair. A woman knelt beside a narrow cot where a child lay covered in threadbare blankets. The woman turned at my entrance, her hand moving instinctively to a kitchen knife on a nearby crate. Her face was gaunt, hollow-eyed from hunger and fear, but there was steel in her spine yet. "Who are you?" Her voice was steady despite everything. "If you're one of Blackwood's men." "I'm not." I held up my hands, showing I meant no harm. "I'm here to help your husband." "He didn't steal anything." "I know." She studied me for a long moment, then slowly lowered the knife. "Everyone knows, but knowing doesn't matter. Blackwood owns the law here. He owns everything." I looked at the child, a girl, maybe 6 years old, her skin flushed with fever. "She's sick." 3 days now. "The company doctor won't come unless we pay. We have no money." Thomas tried to buy medicine with scrip, but they said he was already too far in debt. "So he took bread. Just bread." Her voice cracked. "So our daughter wouldn't starve while burning up with fever." I'd seen it before in other mining towns, other company towns. The pattern was always the same. Pay workers in scrip only redeemable at company stores. Price everything higher than workers can afford. Create a system of perpetual debt. Anyone who protests or steals or tries to leave gets made an example of. Where does Blackwood keep his records? She blinked, surprised by the question. "The office. Second floor of the refinery building. But it's always guarded and..." "I'll worry about the guards. You worry about keeping that girl alive." I pulled out what real money I had, not much, but enough. "Get her to a real doctor. One in the next town if you have to." She stared at the bills in her hand like they might disappear. "Why are you doing this?" "Because nobody else will." I left before she could ask more questions. The less she knew, the safer she'd be. The refinery district was the only part of Brimstone Canyon that showed any real activity. Men in soot-stained clothes moved between buildings, their faces blank with exhaustion. Guards stood at key positions, hired muscle with rifles and clubs, there to prevent theft and discourage troublemakers. I counted 6 of them in my initial survey, probably more inside. The office building was exactly where Mrs. Chen had said, second floor of the main refinery structure, accessible by an external staircase. A guard sat on a chair at the bottom of those stairs, rifle across his knees, had pulled low against the evening sun. I approached openly, hands visible, playing the role of a confused outsider. "Excuse me, friend. I'm looking for the claims office. Someone said it was this building." The guard barely glanced at me. "Claims office is closed. Come back Monday." "I just need to file some paperwork. Won't take but a minute." I said, "It's closed." He finally looked up, and I saw the exact moment he recognized me from the saloon. His hand started moving toward his rifle. I was faster. My fist caught him in the temple, a short, sharp blow that sent him toppling sideways off his chair. He hit the ground hard and stayed down. I dragged him into the shadows beneath the staircase, took his rifle, and started climbing. The office door was locked, but locks in mining towns were rarely quality. A few seconds with my knife, and the mechanism gave way with a soft click. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me. The office was surprisingly neat for a place built on corruption. Ledgers lined the shelves, each one carefully labeled with dates. A large desk dominated the center of the room, its surface clear except for an oil lamp and an inkwell. Maps of the mine system covered one wall, showing the warren of tunnels burrowing into the mountain's heart. I found what I needed in the third ledger I opened. Evidence of systematic theft on a massive scale. Workers paid in scrip valued at half what the company claimed. Goods in the company store priced at twice their worth. Phantom debts added to workers' accounts for equipment they'd never received, medical care they'd never gotten, and all of it signed and countersigned by Cornelius Blackwood himself. It was enough, more than enough. With these ledgers, I could prove that Thomas Chen's supposed debt was manufactured, that his theft of a single loaf of bread was nothing compared to what Blackwood had stolen from hundreds of workers over years. "You're trespassing." I turned slowly. A man stood in the doorway. Not a guard, someone else. He was lean and well-dressed, with cold eyes and a gun pointed at my chest. Unlike the guard downstairs, this man knew how to use it. I could tell by the way he held it, casual but ready. Cornelius Blackwood? I asked. His attorney, Marcus Weaver. And you're under arrest for breaking and entering. I'm a concerned citizen reviewing public records. These aren't public records. Then Blackwood has nothing to hide. I gestured at the ledgers. Unless he does. Weaver's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Whatever you think you've found, it won't matter. This town belongs to Mr. Blackwood. The sheriff belongs to him. The judge belongs to him. Even if you somehow got those ledgers to the territorial capital, which you won't, he owns enough people there to make the problem disappear. Men like Blackwood always think they're untouchable, right up until they're not. Big words from a man looking down a gun barrel. He had a point, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd come alone, confident in his authority and his weapon. Men who rely on intimidation often underestimate desperation. I threw the ledger, not at him. That would have been stupid, but at the oil lamp on the desk. Glass shattered, oil spread. The flame followed, catching fast on the old paper and dry wood. Weaver's attention flickered for just a second toward the sudden fire. That was all I needed. I moved, knocking the gun aside and driving my shoulder into his chest. We crashed through the doorway onto the external landing. The gun clattered down the stairs. He was fast, I'll give him that. His fist caught me in the ribs, driving the air from my lungs. We grappled on the landing. Two men fighting for leverage on a platform that suddenly felt far too small. Below, I could hear shouting as workers noticed the fire, the smoke now billowing from the office windows. His hands found my throat. He was stronger than he looked, fingers digging in like iron. My vision started to dim at the edges. In desperation, I brought my knee up hard into his stomach. He gasped, his grip loosening just enough. I broke free, gulping air, and drove my elbow into his jaw. He staggered back against the railing. The wood gave way with a crack like a gunshot. Weaver's eyes went wide. He grabbed for anything, found only air, and fell. The drop was 12 feet onto packed earth. He hit hard and didn't move. I didn't wait to see if he was dead or just unconscious. The fire was spreading fast, and I could hear boots pounding toward the building. I grabbed one of the ledgers that had survived, the most damning one, and ran. By the time I made it back to the hotel, smoke from the refinery fire had drawn half the town. Men ran with buckets, though whether they were trying to save the building or just prevent the fire from spreading was unclear. In the chaos, nobody noticed one more soot-stained man slipping through the shadows. I cleaned up as best I could, changed shirts, and hid the ledger under a loose floorboard in my room. Then I went to find the one man in Brimstone Canyon who might actually care about justice. Sheriff William Dorsey kept an office next to the assayer's building, a single room with bars on the window and a desk that had seen better days. I found him there as darkness fell, staring at a half-empty bottle of whiskey like it held the answers to questions he was afraid to ask. "Sheriff," he looked up, and I saw a man fighting a losing battle with his conscience. Dorsey was maybe 50, with gray in his beard and too many lines around his eyes. Once upon a time, he might have been a good lawman, but that was before Blackwood bought him, piece by piece, payment by payment, until there was nothing left but the star on his chest and the shame in his eyes. "You're the one from the saloon." Damn near shot Frank Moody. He drew first. That's what folks said. He gestured at the other chair, and I sat. "Also heard you were at the refinery when the fire started." "Was I?" "Attorney says someone attacked him. Stole company records. He's got a broke arm and possibly a cracked skull. Sounds like he should be more careful." Dorsey actually smiled at that, though there was no humor in it. "You're either brave or stupid, son. Haven't figured out which yet." "Maybe both." I leaned forward. "Thomas Chen didn't steal anything that wasn't already stolen from him. You know it. I know it. Every person in this town knows it. Knowing and proving are different things." I can prove it. That got his attention. How? The ledgers. I have one that shows years of systematic fraud. Blackwood's been running a system that amounts to slavery. He pays in worthless scrip, charges inflated prices, and creates phantom debts. Chen's so-called theft. It was taking back what was stolen from him first. Dorsey's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his whiskey. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it isn't, what do you expect me to do? Arrest Cornelius Blackwood? He owns this town. He owns you mean? The sheriff's face hardened. Watch yourself. Or what? You'll arrest me too. How many men has Blackwood made you arrest for crimes that weren't crimes? How many has he made you look away from while his men beat workers who complained or docked pay for invented infractions? I stood, planting my hands on his desk. How do you sleep at night, Sheriff? He looked away. I have a daughter. In Denver. Blackwood pays for her schooling, her boarding. If I cross him, then he'll take it away, and you'll have to explain to her that her father chose money over his soul. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. Finally, Dorsey spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What would you have me do? Your job. Just for once, do your job. Before he could answer, the door burst open. Two of Blackwood's men stood there, guns drawn. Behind them, I could see more in the street. Sheriff Dorsey, one of them said. We're here for the stranger. Mr. Blackwood wants to see him. Dorsey looked at me, then at them, then at the badge on his chest. I watched him make his choice, saw the exact moment when years of compromise and cowardice crystallized into something harder. No, he said. The gunman blinked. Sir, I said no. This man hasn't been charged with anything. You have no authority to take him. Mr. Blackwood can take it up with the territorial marshal if he has a complaint. Dorsey stood, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked like a lawman. Now get out of my office. They left, but I knew it wasn't over. Men like Blackwood didn't take no for an answer. You just made an enemy, I told Dorsey. I've been making enemies for years, just usually the wrong ones. He pulled open a drawer and removed a gun belt, strapping it on with hands that were steadier now. If we're going to do this, we do it right. I need to see that ledger. I took him to the hotel, showed him the evidence hidden beneath the floorboard. He read through it slowly, his expression growing darker with each page. Jesus, he muttered. I knew it was bad, but this is theft on a scale I can barely comprehend. He's stolen thousands, tens of thousands, and killed. Look at the entries for medical care. Workers charged for treatment they never received. You think all those men who died in mining accidents really died from accidents? Dorsey closed the ledger, his jaw set. I'm going to the telegraph office, sending this to the territorial capital, to the marshal service, to every authority that might possibly give a damn. Blackwood will try to stop you. Then I guess we'll see what I'm made of after all these years. We made it 3 blocks before they came for us. 8 men, maybe 10. Materializing from alleys and shadows. They didn't draw their guns immediately. This was a warning, a show of force. Sheriff, one of them called. Mr. Blackwood requests your presence at the mansion. Both of you. And if we decline, then we'll have to insist. Dorsey's hand moved toward his gun. I put my hand on his arm, stopping him. Not here. Too many civilians. He knew I was right, but I could see it cost him. Fine, we'll see what Blackwood wants. The mansion was even more obscene up close. While children starved below, Cornelius Blackwood lived in imported luxury. Carpets from Persia, furniture from Europe, paintings that probably cost more than most miners would see in a lifetime. We were led through halls lit by gas lamps, past rooms that served no purpose except to display wealth. Blackwood waited for us in his study. A room paneled in dark wood with bookshelves that reached the ceiling. He sat behind a massive desk, and despite everything, I was surprised by his appearance. I had expected a monster, but Cornelius Blackwood looked like someone's grandfather. White hair, kind eyes, a gentle smile. Sheriff Dorsey, he said warmly. "And our mysterious visitor. Please sit. Can I offer you a drink?" "We'll stand," Dorsey said. "Suit yourself." Blackwood poured himself a brandy from a crystal decanter. "I understand there was an unfortunate incident at the refinery. A fire, property damaged, my attorney injured." "Unfortunate," I agreed. "I also understand certain documents may have been misplaced." His eyes, which had seemed kind, now showed something else entirely. A coldness that went bone deep. "Documents that belong to me." "Documents that prove you've been running a criminal enterprise," I said. "Criminal is such a loaded word. I prefer to think of it as efficient capitalism. I provide jobs, housing, everything these people need. Is it my fault they can't manage their finances?" "You pay them in scrip that's worthless and charge them prices that ensure they'll never escape debt." He smiled. "I give them opportunity. What they do with it is their concern." Dorsey stepped forward. "Thomas Chen is going to hang for stealing bread. Bread he needed to feed his family while his daughter lay sick because your company doctor wouldn't treat her without payment." "Ah yes, young Mr. Chen. A shame, truly. But the law must be respected, Sheriff. You of all people understand that." "The law," Dorsey said quietly, "doesn't belong to you." Blackwood's expression hardened. "In this canyon, everything belongs to me. The mine, the refinery, the stores, the houses. Even you, Sheriff. Or have you forgotten who pays your salary? Who sends money to Denver every month for your daughter's education? I'm giving it back. Every penny. Really?" Blackwood sipped his brandy. "And how will young Margaret finish her schooling? She's so close to graduating. It would be a terrible shame if she had to leave now, especially considering how much she's looking forward to becoming a teacher." I watched Dorsey struggle, saw the knife Blackwood was twisting. But to his credit, the sheriff didn't bend. "She'll understand." Will she? Will she understand that her father chose to protect a thief over her future? I chose to protect an innocent man over corruption. Blackwood set down his glass. "You're making a mistake, William. Both of you. The territorial authorities won't come. I've made arrangements. And even if they did, what would they find? Some creative bookkeeping at worst, easily explained as errors. You have no case. We have your ledger. You have a ledger. One that could have been altered by anyone. One that mysteriously appeared after a fire started by a criminal trespasser." He smiled again, that grandfatherly smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Gentlemen, I'm offering you a way out. Return the ledger, leave town, and I'll forget this entire unpleasant business. I'll even commute Chen's sentence. How's that for mercy? And if we refuse, then tomorrow at noon, Thomas Chen hangs. And accidents might start happening to other people too. Sheriff's daughters in faraway cities can have such terrible luck sometimes. Strange men in hotels sometimes don't wake up in the morning. These things happen." He was threatening us openly now, not even bothering to hide it. Men who had that much power rarely did. I looked at Dorsey. He looked at me. And without words, we understood each other. "We refuse," I said. Blackwood's smile vanished. "Then you're both fools. Get them out of my sight." We were escorted out at gunpoint, back down the hill to town. As we walked, Dorsey spoke quietly. "You know he'll try to kill us." "Probably. And you're still going through with this?" "I've never been good at backing down." "Neither have I." He actually laughed. "Not sure if that makes us brave or just stupid." "I'm still going with both." Morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I spent the hours before dawn preparing, checking my revolver, counting bullets, making sure my knife was sharp. Not because I thought I could fight my way out if it came to that. In a town controlled by one man with dozens of hired guns, fighting would just get me killed. But I wanted to be ready anyway. Dorsey came to my room just after sunrise. He looked like he hadn't slept, and I probably looked the same. "I sent a telegram," he said, "to the territorial marshal, the governor's office, even federal authorities. Told them everything, the fraud, the theft, the murder. Included excerpts from the ledger." "Will they come?" "Maybe. Probably not in time. He sat heavily on the room's one chair. Blackwood's right about one thing. He's got people everywhere. But if something happens to us, at least there's a record. Someone will investigate eventually. Comforting. Best I can do. We sat in silence for a while. 2 men waiting for noon to arrive and change everything. Finally, Dorsey spoke again. Why are you here? Really? You don't know Chen. Don't know anyone in this town. So why risk your life for them? I thought about that. Thought about all the Thomas Chens I'd seen over the years. Miners, farmers, workers ground down by systems designed to grind them. Thought about how easy it was to look away. To tell yourself it wasn't your problem. Because someone has to. I said finally. Because if people like us don't stand up to people like Blackwood, then men like Chen hang for stealing bread, while monsters die in comfortable beds, surrounded by luxury. Dorsey nodded slowly. My wife used to say something similar. Before she died. She'd be ashamed of what I became, of the things I let Blackwood do. But you're standing now. Better late than never, I suppose. By 11 o'clock, the entire town had gathered in the main street. The gallows stood ready, its noose swaying gently in the hot wind. Guards ringed the platform, rifles ready. On the hill above, I could see figures watching from the mansion's windows, Blackwood and his people, waiting to see their will enforced. Thomas Chen was let out of the jail at 1:45. He was a small man, made smaller by fear and hunger. His wife walked beside him, holding his hand, and I saw tears streaming down her face. Their daughter was nowhere to be seen. Still sick, probably. Still lying in that dark shack, wondering why her father wasn't there. The crowd was silent. Nobody cheered. Nobody jeered. They just watched with the hollow eyes of people who'd seen too much and felt too powerless to stop it. Dorsey and I stood near the gallows, close enough to act if we got the chance. My hand rested casually near my gun. Not threatening, not yet, but ready. The hangman, one of Blackwood's foremen, pressed into service, placed a noose around Chen's neck. Chen didn't struggle. He'd gone somewhere else in his mind. Probably somewhere he could be with his family one last time. Any last words? The hangman asked, more from tradition than any real interest. Chen opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a voice rang out clear and strong. Stop this. Everyone turned. A boy stood at the edge of the crowd, maybe 14, gangly and scared but refusing to back down. Thomas Chen didn't steal anything. It's all a lie. Blackwood's the thief. He's been stealing from all of us for years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The guards shifted nervously. This wasn't in the script. Quiet, boy. One of the foremen barked. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us. Another voice, this time an older man. He's right. Blackwood's been robbing us blind, charging us for things we never got, paying us in scrip that's worthless anywhere but his stores. More voices joined in. The crowd was finding its courage, remembering that they outnumbered the guards 10-1, that Blackwood's power came from their fear, and fear could break. I saw my chance. I stepped forward, pulling the ledger from inside my coat and holding it high. I have proof. Records showing everything Blackwood has stolen. Thomas Chen took 1 loaf of bread. Blackwood has taken thousands of dollars. Who's the real criminal here? The guards moved to stop me, but the crowd surged forward, a wave of desperate anger finally finding its voice. For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then someone threw a stone. It hit one of the guards in the shoulder. He stumbled, and that was all it took. The crowd erupted. Guards were overwhelmed, disarmed. The gallows were stormed. Someone cut Chen loose, and his wife pulled him back into the mob, away from danger. It was chaos, but it was purposeful chaos. Years of frustration and depression finally exploding into action. I grabbed Dorsey's arm. The mansion. We need to get to Blackwood before he runs. We fought our way through the crowd, up the path toward the hill. Behind us, I could hear the sounds of revolution, breaking glass, shouting, the thud of fists on flesh. Brimstone Canyon was rising, and God help anyone in its way. The mansion's guards had abandoned their posts. running down the hill to try to restore order in town. That left the building nearly undefended, but not quite. As Dorsey and I approached the front entrance, two men stepped out, rifles raised. "Stop right there, Sheriff." I recognized one of them, Frank Moody, the man from the saloon. His face was bruised where I'd hit him, and he looked eager for payback. "Out of the way, Frank," Dorsey said. "This is over." "Nothing's over. Mr. Blackwood's got the territorial judge on his way. Soon as he gets here, every one of those rioters is going to hang." "The territorial judge works for Blackwood?" "Everyone works for someone, Sheriff. You should remember that." Dorsey's hand moved toward his gun. "Last chance, Frank. Step aside." Moody raised his rifle. "Can't do that." What happened next happened fast. Dorsey drew and fired in one smooth motion, not at Moody, but at the other guard, the one who looked most ready to shoot. The man went down with a cry. Moody hesitated, just for a second, torn between shooting and running. That hesitation cost him. I crossed the distance between us in 3 strides and drove my fist into his gut. He doubled over, and I brought my knee up into his face. He dropped. "Not bad for an old lawman," I said. "Not bad yourself." Dorsey was already moving toward the entrance. "Come on, before more show up." Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet. Our boots echoed on marble floors as we searched room by room. Parlors, dining rooms, a library that probably held more books than the entire town had ever seen. All of it empty. We found Blackwood in his study, calmly packing documents into a leather case. He didn't look surprised to see us. "Gentlemen," he said pleasantly. "Come to arrest me, Sheriff?" Something like that. "On what charges?" "Creative bookkeeping. Every transaction in those ledgers is technically legal. Immoral, perhaps, but legal. I'm very careful about such things." "Murder," I said. "You let workers die by denying them medical care. That's murder. That's negligence at worst. A civil matter, not criminal. No prosecutor in the territory will touch it." He closed the case with a definitive snap. "You've caused a great deal of trouble, both of you. Incited a riot, destroyed property, assaulted my employees. I have witnesses, documentation. By tomorrow, there'll be warrants for your arrest." "We have the ledgers." "You have one ledger, one that could have been forged, one that mysteriously appeared after you committed multiple felonies on my property." He smiled. "I've been at this game a long time. I know how it's played." "Game." Dorsey's voice was low, dangerous. "People died. Families were destroyed. And you call it a game. I call it business. The strong survive, the weak don't. That's nature. I simply applied natural law to economics." I'd met men like Blackwood before, men who justified cruelty with philosophy, who turned their lack of empathy into a virtue. There was no reaching them, no appealing to their conscience. They didn't have one. "You're under arrest," Dorsey said, "for fraud, for theft, for conspiracy to commit murder. You're going to stand trial, and I'm going to make sure the right people hear about it." "And how will you do that, Sheriff? You're one man in one small town. I have lawyers, judges, politicians. What do you have?" "He has me," I said. "And I know people too. People who don't work for you. Journalists, federal marshals, territorial congressmen. This story is going to spread, Blackwood. And when it does, all your bought and paid for friends will run for cover. Nobody wants to be associated with a scandal this big." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Blackwood's face. "You're bluffing. Try me." The sound of gunfire from below made us all freeze. Through the study window, I could see flames rising from the refinery. The mob had reached it, and they were burning it down. Blackwood's face went pale. No, they can't. That's worth more than you can afford to lose," I finished. "Your empire is falling, Blackwood. Best to save what you can while you still can." He stared out the window at his burning investment, and I saw something break inside him. Not remorse. Men like him didn't do remorse. But defeat. The understanding that for the first time in his life, he couldn't buy or threaten his way out. I want immunity, he said finally. I'll testify against my partners, give you names, locations, everything. But I want immunity and safe passage out of the territory. Dorsey looked at me. I shrugged. Not my decision. I'm not the law here. The sheriff thought about it. I could see the calculation behind his eyes. What they could gain versus what it would cost. Finally, he nodded. Conditional immunity. You cooperate fully. Give us everything. And maybe, you don't hang. But you're going to prison, Blackwood. For a long time. Better than hanging. Barely. We let him out of the mansion in handcuffs. The riot had mostly died down by then, replaced by an eerie calm. People stood in the street, looking at each other as if surprised by what they'd done. The gallows had been torn down. The guard had been disarmed. Thomas Chen stood with his wife and daughter, the little girl wrapped in blankets despite the heat. When they saw Blackwood, a roar went up from the crowd. People surged forward, angry and vengeful. For a moment, I thought we'd have to fight our way through. Then Chen stepped forward, holding up his hands. "No," he shouted. "No more violence. We're better than that. Let the law handle him." The crowd hesitated, then slowly backed down. Chen had given them permission to be human again, to remember that justice wasn't the same as revenge. Dorsey locked Blackwood in the jail cell that had held Chen just hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As we walked back to the hotel, Dorsey asked, "What now?" "Now you send more telegrams. Get the real authorities here before Blackwood's friends try to get him out. Document everything. And most importantly..." "What?" "Give people their town back." I left Brimstone Canyon 3 days later. By then, the territorial marshal had arrived with a company of men. They'd taken Blackwood into custody, seized the ledgers, and begun the long process of untangling years of fraud and corruption. It would take time. These things always did, but at least it had started. Thomas Chen and his family saw me off. The little girl was recovering, color returning to her cheeks. Chen shook my hand, and there were tears in his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "Don't thank me. Thank Sheriff Dorsey. He's the one who found his backbone when it mattered." "Thank both of you, then." His wife pressed something into my hand, a small jade pendant on a leather cord. "It's not much, but it's all we have. Please take it." I tried to refuse, but she wouldn't hear of it, so I took the pendant and put it around my neck, next to the other small reminders I carried of people I'd helped or tried to help. "What will you do now?" Chen asked. "Keep riding. There are other towns, other Blackwoods. Someone has to stand up to them. You can't fight them all." "Maybe not, but I can fight some. And maybe if enough people start fighting, the rest will get the idea." Dorsey walked me to the edge of town. His badge was polished now, shining in the sunlight. He stood straighter than when I had first met him, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Margaret wrote," he said. "She's proud of me. Says she always knew I'd do the right thing eventually." She was right. I was thinking, after this is all settled, after they close the books on Blackwood, maybe I should resign. Let this town choose a new sheriff. Someone who hasn't been compromised. They could do a lot worse than you. You proved that when it counted. Still, fresh start might be good for everyone. I swung up into my saddle. My mare snorted, eager to get moving. "You know, Sheriff, you did more than arrest one corrupt mine owner. You showed people they could stand up. That power isn't inevitable. That's worth more than any prosecution." "Maybe, but it costs something too. The refinery's gone. The mine's closed pending investigation. People have no jobs, no income. We might have freed them from one kind of slavery only to deliver them to another, starvation. Then help them find something else. This canyon has more than silver. It has people who know how to work, how to survive. They'll figure it out." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. It's just necessary." We shook hands one last time, and then I rode out. Behind me, Brimstone Canyon continued its transformation from company town to something else, something better. It wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But at least now they had a chance. The road ahead was long and dusty, the same as always. Somewhere out, there were other towns, other Blackwoods, other people who needed someone to stand up when everyone else looked away. I'd find them. I always did. The jade pendant swung gently against my chest as my mare carried me toward the horizon. In my saddlebags, I had enough supplies for a week, enough ammunition for whatever came next, and enough stubbornness to keep going no matter what. Behind me, the smoke from Brimstone Canyon's fires rose into the sky, visible for miles. It would be seen in other mining towns, other company operations. They'd hear the story of what happened when people finally said enough. Maybe it would inspire them. Maybe it would scare their oppressors. Maybe both. As the sun climbed higher and the canyon disappeared behind me, I thought about something Chen had said. You can't fight them all. He was right. I couldn't. But I could fight the next one, and the one after that, and the one after that. For as long as there was breath in my body and steel in my spine, I'd keep riding toward trouble, toward injustice, toward the places where someone needed to stand up and say no. Not because I was brave, not because I was righteous, but because someone had to. And today, tomorrow, and for as many days as I had left, that someone was going to be me. The road stretched on, endless and unforgiving. I didn't know where it would lead, what towns I'd find, what battles I'd fight. But I knew one thing for certain. Wherever I went, whatever I faced, I'd face it standing. That was enough. It had to be. See you around, my friend. I've got another story for you.